Okay, I have a series of videos here, probably about 10 of them, which are just going to look at getting you up to speed on what databases are all about. And from the point of view of this module, where we hope to end up at the end of April, early May or so, is that we have what we call a client-server website. Okay, the client being the user's PC. Typically where you will look at the web pages and the user will always also complete a form. Okay, and when we click the submit button, then we want the information from the form to be inserted into a database table. Okay, so what do we mean by all this? What do we mean by client server? What do we mean by databases? How do we set all this up so that we take our existing knowledge of HTML and CSS and JavaScript and we can insert information into a database. Okay, so very, very important and useful skills. At the end of the semester, you'll have built a client-server website, and these skills are very much in demand by industry. Okay, so the first thing we need to know is what do you mean by a web server, because I mentioned client-server earlier. Okay, the client is just the PC when you're actually working writing code or whatever. That is the client. Okay, and as I said earlier, we try and do as much validation using JavaScript and HTML on the client side. Okay, because it takes the pressure off the server. But that, of course, raises the issue of what do you mean by server? Well, a server is just a fancy word for computer somewhere on the planet. And it is set up to store or to host websites. Okay, but another aspect of a web server is that we can actually create databases on it. Okay, and then we can get the website that sits on the web server to talk to the database, which sits on the same web server typically. Okay, so we need passwords to do all that sort of stuff, username and password, and where is the database in relation to the actual website that's hosted on the server. Now, you've already used the MySQL 05 or 07, 08, that .comp.dkit.ie. Okay, that is a web server. And so far, we have used it in semester 1 just to host websites. So you know all about that, doing net2FTP and so on. And that's fine. So you'll need to keep your username and password credentials handy in that email that you got, root at mysql0 Okay, those need to be handy because we're going to need those credentials in order to work with databases. So we're going to build we're not going to build databases because you're only allowed to have one database that's set up for you, and it is your D number, your student D number already. Okay, but we can build what are called tables on the databases. So you're going to need to be able to do that by logging in using your username, password, credentials. Okay, well, before we start doing that, if I can just find my mouse here, what do we mean by web server? I just want to give you a slightly bit more rigorous introduction to what I mean by a web server. Okay, so it's a computer. Okay, and there's software installed which allows that computer to supply web pages to the internet. Okay, and when a computer is connected to the internet, just like when a phone is connected to the phone service, every phone has a unique phone number. Okay, so every web server has a unique, what's called a unique address, a unique IP address or internet protocol address. And protocol just means the rules for communicating between two people. So, for example, if you're to become the ambassador of a country, you would arrive and you would meet the head of state and you would pass over your protocols, which is just your details, and you would have to shake hands in a particular way or maybe bow. That is part of the protocol of dealing with people in different countries, different cultures. Okay, so protocol is a set of rules. There are different sets of rules. Okay, one set of rules begins with http://. Another set of rules begins with HTTPS. S means secure. P means protocol. Okay, FTP, which we use net2FTP. Okay, so POP stands for protocol. It's always preceded by a T. Okay, which is transfer protocol. Okay, and then HT, hypertext transfer protocol. S means secure, and then FTP, file transfer protocol. Okay, so it's a set of rules that allow you to transfer data between two computers. Think of it that way. Okay, and they could be web pages, HTML, hypertext markup language, okay, HTML, HTTP, or it could be a file transfer protocol. Okay, and then the web server itself, the computer has to be set up in a particular way, and the www part is one way to do that. Okay, there's www2s and otherwise we won't get too bogged down into that. Okay, and then we've got the IP address, which has also got an alias, which is actually familiar words like rt.ie. Okay, so that's the domain name, and then the IE is a bit like the country. Okay, you can also have .com, .net, .org, and so on. Okay, so they're the top level domains which apply country, or I suppose thematically .com and .org. Okay, so common web servers in use, and when I say web server, what is it? It's software. Okay, so common software to make a computer into a web server. Apache would be one, and that's the one we're using in our MySQL 0 whatever. Okay, Microsoft have another one, Nginx is another one, and so on. Okay, so that will show you the market share, that link there, so feel free to copy that. Okay, now normally the web server is on a different computer, but you could actually set up a web server on your own machine using software called XAMPP. Now I'm kind of going to not do that with you guys, because there's just so much that has kind of been thrown at you. I want to keep it as simple as possible. So we'll just work on the MySQL 03 there, but it's probably 05 or 07 depending on what's been set up for you. Okay, so we need to think about how are the data and the code that we're working with, how are they related to the client side and the server side. Okay, we've sort of got two ways of thinking about this. Okay, we've got a logical way and we've got a time related way. Okay, so in the logical way, we're not interested at all about the distances and between where all these things are. Okay, so on the left hand side we have the client side, just the browser on the client's machine there, and all those HTML, CSS, JavaScript technologies that we're familiar with that go to make a web page. Okay, but we're going to have two more technologies we need to be interested in, two more software technologies, two more programming languages. Okay, the good news is, okay, so the bad news is it's two more programming languages. Okay, the good news is we are going to be very what's the word? Mercenary about this. Okay, we are just going to use these as a means to an end, and the means to an end is basically to get information from the database or to write information into the database. We're going to use a language called SQL to do that. Okay, structured query language. And then we are going to have what's called an interpreter language, which is like a buffer or a midway point between our client, our browser, and the database. Okay, so the purpose of PHP is to either take the information from the web page, for example a form, and pass it then into an SQL command where it's going to be basically inserted into the database. Okay, or to get information from the database, okay, and parcel that up in HTML and return that, or encapsulate it within HTML code and return it back to the browser. Okay, so that when you look at the browser, if you look at a PHP page, okay, just instead of .html we have .php. Instead of seeing all the PHP code, you just see content, and you have no idea if it comes from a database or not. Okay, so PHP will return HTML basically. Okay, from the point of view of time, we've got typically, okay, for HTML web page retrieval, the browser, you click on a link, and we go to RT's web page, and it returns a web page back to the server. Okay, but when we've got PHP web pages, we have a few other things to do. Okay, we go to the server, yes, but then we have to activate what's called the PHP engine, which typically, if you were logging in, if you're an RT employee, you were logging in, you'd have to activate the PHP engine, which is going to pass your username and password into the MySQL server, which is going to see is your record in there. If it is, back to the PHP engine, which then returns the web page back to the user's browser. Okay, so those are the sort of ballpark, very brief introduction to web server. Okay, so 2 new programming languages, PHP and MySQL. So we'll work on them as time goes on. Okay, so in the next video we will look at what we mean by databases.